Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Friday, the 16th of January. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, the White House warns all options are still on the table for Iran, as Bloomberg analysis shows Trump increasingly following through on threats.
Venezuela's opposition leader gives the US president her Nobel Peace Prize medal.
Plus, is 10 million people too many? Switzerland debates a population cap amid a growing immigration backlash.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
US officials have renewed the threat of possible military action against Iran after President Trump suggested the country's regime may have averted strikes by pledging not to execute protesters. Here's what the US ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, told the UN Security Council.
President Trump is a man of action, not endless talk like we see at the United Nations. He has made it clear all options are on the table to stop the slaughter. And no one should know that better than the leadership of the Iranian regime.
Mike Waltz's comments were echoed by the White House press secretary as the Associated Press and New York Times reported that leaders across the Middle East have been making the case to the US president not to strike Iran. Meanwhile, Iran's deputy representative to the UN, Gholam Hossein Darzi, delivered this warning to the American administration.
Iran seeks neither escalation nor confrontation. However, any act of aggression, direct or indirect, will be met with a decisive, proportionate and lawful response.
The deputy Iranian ambassador to the UN was also speaking at the Security Council meeting as Fox News reported that the US is moving an aircraft carrier to the Middle East, with more assets expected to arrive in the coming days.
The heightened US-Iran rhetoric comes as Bloomberg Economics has found that Donald Trump is following through on a greater share of his threats in his second term as president. During his first term, Trump carried out about 40% of the threats that he made. That rate has risen to 60% so far in his second administration. As Bloomberg's chief geo-economics analyst Jennifer Welch puts it, the shift suggests Tehran shouldn't bet on taco, referring to a popular investor shorthand for Trump always chickens out.
And the Venezuelan opposition leader Corina Machado has given her Nobel Peace Prize medal to the US president at a meeting in the White House. In a social media post hours later, Trump called the gesture a great honour and described Machado as a wonderful woman. Speaking to reporters, the politician and activist said the presentation had historic significance.
I presented the President of the United States the medal, Nobel Peace Prize, and 200 years in history, the people of Bolivar are giving back to the heir of Washington a medal, in this case a medal of the Nobel Peace Prize, as a recognition for his unique commitment with our freedom.
Corina Machado speaking there after Donald Trump previously said he didn't believe she had support or respect in Venezuela and cleared the way for the Vice President Delcy Rodriguez to become acting president. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has said the award cannot be shared or transferred.
Wall Street's five biggest banks reported a record $134 billion of trading revenue last year, and they say more is coming. Morgan Stanley CEO and chairman Ted Pick led the optimism.
The results for every quarter over the last 8 are a blueprint for Morgan Stanley's success. We expect this mix of tailwinds and headwinds to prevail in 2026 and are prepared to continue to execute.
Debt bankers at Ted Pick's Morgan Stanley increased revenue by 93% in the fourth quarter, capping a record year. The turbulent Trump administration has kept investors on edge, but for bank traders, that has kept paying off as clients rush to reposition their portfolios. Goldman Sachs' CEO David Solomon says deal making has also taken off.
I think the world is set up at the moment to be incredibly constructive in 2026. For M&A and capital markets activity. And I think the likely scenario is it is a very, very good year for M&A and capital markets activity.
Shares of both Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley rose the most since April after they disclosed their results. But despite the bumper year and strong forecasts, there were also warnings of enormous amounts of risk and possible AI-related job cuts ahead.
China is clamping down on high-speed trading. According to Bloomberg sources, commodities futures exchanges in Shanghai and Guangzhou are among those who've told local brokers to remove servers dedicated to high-frequency traders that are located inside the exchange's data centres. There's also a preliminary plan to add 2 milliseconds of latency to any servers that connect to futures exchanges from third-party computer rooms. Chinese shares tumbled on the news. The clampdown will hit China's army of domestic high-frequency firms, as well as global firms including Citadel Securities, Jane Street and Jump Trading, who did not respond to requests for comment.
One of the UK's Conservative Party's most senior politicians has defected to Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. Robert Jenrick says that both Labour and the Conservatives have broken Britain.
But whilst this government is accelerating our decline, they didn't begin it. We've had 20 to 30 years of this because the two main parties are rotten. They are no longer fit for purpose. They both broke Britain and neither can fix it.
Robert Jenrick had challenged Kemi Badenoch to lead the Conservatives in 2024 and had served as a minister running housing and immigration policy. Despite Conservatives broadly rallying behind Badenoch, the defection cements the split on the right. Traditionally a two-party system, British politics now has 5 parties polling at similar levels, making May's local elections highly uncertain. Those are some of our top stories for you this morning. Let's think about the market. So Asian equities have reached an all-time high. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index currently is up by 0.3%. We also saw Eurostock 600 shares hitting an all-time peak last night at the close of play. US stock futures are up. European stock futures, though, sinking 0.3%. That issue with China targeting high-frequency trading did see shares drop in China. CSI 300 down 0.6 this hour. Global corporate bond yield premiums have fallen to their lowest since 2007, I think a key line in bond markets. And in terms of oil markets, $63.51 for Brent crude. So we're holding on to the big decline that we saw yesterday. Those are the markets.
In a moment, more on some of the economic challenges facing Iran. Plus, Switzerland's debating a proposal to cap its population at 10 million. But another story that caught our eye this morning, if you were listening to us yesterday, you'll have heard us discussing how people are drinking less, particularly in bars. But our colleagues at Bloomberg Weekend have come up with the alternative, which is going to a sauna instead. They've been tracking this boom in saunas in London and New York. Of course, they're popping up everywhere, from the luxury types, but also like the likes of the community sauna baths in London as well. These are places aiming to take the place of the coffee shop, the pub or the nightclub. People are having work meetings apparently there. I'm really not sure about that.
Really?
Or even dates.
I shudder to think about a community sauna. Look, executives, I hear, used to run and walk together. Maybe now it's about sweating it out together. I have my doubts. Weirdly, Stephen, I actually know someone who has installed one of those small infrared electric cabin saunas. Have you ever been in one of those? It's like sitting in a phone box. Small.
But, I mean, the interesting part about this that I found is the question of giving a new gathering place for community as well, somewhere where you're not looking at your phones, which is something that I can certainly appreciate. I did also really like, they spoke to the co-owner of the Russian and Turkish baths in Manhattan, which has been around for 40 plus years. And they say, surprisingly, you know, it's perhaps not just the wellness gains that people are getting into this game for, perhaps also because they've realised they can make quite a lot of money if you open one of these two. So a healthy dose of cynicism there. We'll put a link to the piece in our podcast show notes.
Okay, let's bring you more on the situation in Iran and take a look at some of the wider economic issues that are at play. Our chief emerging markets economist, Ziad Daoud, joins us now for more on this. Good to speak to you. Some of your colleagues at Bloomberg Economics and you have been looking into the chances of an escalation in Iran and what that means. What have the team found out about this?
Well, good morning. Well, this week has been quite eventful when it came to Iran. At the beginning of the week, we had clear threats from President Trump saying that help is on its way to protesters in Iran. And then a couple of days later, he seemed to have signaled he's holding off the attacks. So what's going on there? Three possibilities. One of them is that there is lobbying from the Gulf that might have worked. There is a second possibility, which is basically President Trump is fearing basically a blowback and an escalation into the region. And the third possibility, this is all a deception act and maybe Trump will attack Iran eventually. My colleague Jennifer Welch has looked at Trump's track record in terms of whether he follows through on his threats or not. And it's not great news for Iran. She found that during his second term, he followed through on 60% of his threats. That includes threats to attack, which followed by strikes on the Houthis, on Nigeria, and even on Iran itself.
Okay, so Ziad, these protests began over economic issues in Iran. What is the situation in the country's economy now, and will it have been made worse by the weeks of protest?
Sure. I mean, there is this quote that's attributed to Lenin, I think, which said the easiest way or the best way to destroy a system is to debase the currency. And Iran had plenty of currency debasement in recent years. The rial has depreciated, I think, by around 70% against the dollar since 2022. Inflation has been stuck at 40% for a number of years. So the economic conditions have been difficult, and that what basically triggered the protests on the 28th of December. Authorities did respond by replacing the central bank governor, trying to basically put a floor under the currency and under inflation. But I think the demands have moved on from the economics to the politics. In terms of what the economic situation and whether it's going to get worse or better with the events, I mean, there's no doubt with higher uncertainty, with Trump's 25% tariffs on countries that do business with Iran, with uncertainty about the future of the country and even the military strikes on the country, or not, whether that happens or not, that the economic situation, at least in the short term, is not going to get any better.
No, huge risk potentially. In terms of the thing that global markets think about a lot, oil supplies, what could be the effect there?
There's a lot of oil at risk here. If you think about Iran alone, it supplies about 5% of global oil supplies. Some of it is obviously consumed domestically, some of it is exported mostly to China. So that is a significant amount of oil supplies, bigger than Venezuela, for example. But that's not where the risk stops, right? Because there is a risk, and there are threats from Iran that there will be retaliation on the region. And if you add up not just Iran, but if you also include Iraq and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Kuwait and the Gulf, we're talking about 1/3 of global oil supplies. If you think about the one choke point, which is the Strait of Hormuz, we have 20% of global oil supplies that goes through that. Yes, This waterway has never been shut, and Iran never followed through on its threats to shut the Strait of Hormuz. But also, we're in an unprecedented time, and there is basically existential risk for the system in Iran, and they may do stuff that they haven't done before. So we're talking about a lot of oil at risk. If you just constrain yourself to Iran, that's 5% of global supplies, and that can go up to 20% of global oil exports if you include also the Strait of Hormuz, and that will have an effect on oil prices.
Okay. Ziad, thanks so much for joining us with your analysis this morning. Ziad Daoud, there, our Chief Emerging Markets Economist at Bloomberg Economics. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
As business and political leaders from around the world descend on the Swiss town of Davos in the coming days, voters in Switzerland are debating a proposal to cap the country's population at 10 million. It's an idea that has alarmed businesses but is attracting growing public support. Our reporter Hugo Miller joins us now from Geneva. Hugo, why has this proposal come about? How has it come about exactly?
Well, good morning. It really stems from a very simple number: fivefold and that refers to the fact that Switzerland's population over the past decade has risen 5 times as fast as the neighboring EU. So while we hear about complaints about immigration, over excess immigration in the UK and France and Germany, and that's been really contributing to the rise of parties on the far right, here in Switzerland, the actual numbers are far greater, and that's the underlying demographic.
Switzerland's population is currently just over 9 million. How would a cap work if it were to happen?
Exactly. The population is currently 9.1 million, but has been growing fast, as I just referenced. The idea that is being brought by the Swiss People's Party, which gathered 100,000 signatures, which means it has to be addressed by the government, is that if the population reaches 9.5 million, so an increase of just another 400,000, the initiative, if passed into law, would deny entrance to newcomers like asylum seekers and then families of foreign residents, which would create a really unpleasant situation where you would have essentially those that would be legally entitled to be in Switzerland, but their family members would not be. And then furthermore, if the population reached 10 million, so an increase of another half a million people, the government would be compelled, if this proposal passed, to introduce more measures. And then if the numbers didn't drop off after that, then Switzerland would have to quit the free movement accord that it has with the European Union.
What are the chances of this passing, this cap, this limit to 10 million people in Switzerland?
Well, this is perhaps the most interesting bit in the way in which Switzerland stands apart from, let's say, France or Germany. Support is high, around 48% for the proposal, so close to half of the population. Now, you have numbers similar to that in some of these neighboring countries. But what's different about Switzerland is there is widespread support among young people.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.